At the recent Web Summit conference in Lisbon, the name of Geoffrey Hinton came up in several occasions when talking about the risks of AI.
We have no idea how to control it, and you don't have to take my word for it.
Once these artificial intelligences get smarter than we are, they will take control. They'll make us irrelevant. And that's quite worrying, and nobody knows how to prevent that for sure.
Hinton has been a speaker at several Web Summit events and its sister event Collision. One of the presentations at the last edition of Collision, however, was not particularly promoted by the organizers. In fact, we didn't find the speaker's name in the session description, which could have attracted more attendees. One reason might be that Hinton made some politically sensitive comments about US politics, particularly about the Supreme Court. Since our focus is on digital transition and innovation, we will stick to the program and save the political commentary for another time. Hinton was on stage in a sort of debate with Canadian journalist Stephen Marsh. His remarks provide a strong summary of the negative aspects of AI when it will achieve a human-level intelligence. However, Hinton leaves us with an optimistic scenario at the end of this video. But let's start with the 8 biggest problems of AI according to Geoffrey Hinton.
There's a whole bunch of them, but one of them is surveillance,
Okay.
which will help authoritarian states stay in power. There's lethal autonomous weapons, which we're going to see very soon. There's fake videos corrupting elections. There's job losses, which are going to increase the gap between rich and poor. There's cybercrime, which is increasing rapidly. There's bioterrorism.
6.
There's the alignment problem, which is how are you sure that the AI is going to do something that you'd like when you tell it to do something?
Right.
And there's finally the existential threat that it will go rogue and take over.
As we saw in the previous clip, the existential threat is the issue Hinton discusses most often. However, in the short term, he is more concerned about a different problem from his list: surveillance. Here, he tells us why.
So the existential threat is the one I've talked about the most,
Right.
but that's not the most urgent by a long way. I think surveillance is something to worry about. So AI is going to be very good at surveillance. It's going to help authoritarian regimes stay in power. Now, in the US, the founders thought about this kind of thing, and they put in protections against it, like the Supreme Court.
According to Hinton, there are risks associated with governments that are unprepared to adopt new game-changing technologies. Societies have faced some of these risks in the past, but governments have always managed to develop solutions. This will likely happen with AI as well. But countries do address the issues in different ways, with one exception. Let's listen.
So, for example, in all of these countries that are making up regulations, the regulations always have a little clause in them that say, none of these regulations apply to military uses of AI. So, defense departments won't allow governments to rule out lethal autonomous weapons. If you look at the European legislation, there's an explicit clause in there that simply says, none of these regulations apply to military applications of AI. For lethal autonomous weapons, it'll be like chemical weapons. So after the First World War, people realized they were so terrible that they had Geneva Conventions, and they pretty much held. Putin isn't using chemical weapons in the Ukraine, at least not yet. So it's pretty much worked, and we may get that for lethal autonomous weapons, but not until we've seen how awful they are.
The next major issue Hinton addresses is alignment. The alignment problem is one of the most crucial challenges in AI safety. It refers to the challenge of making sure that artificial intelligence systems address goals and behaviors that are aligned with human values and intentions. Let's hear it in Hinton's words first, before providing some examples.
So, well, one reason is if you give an AI some goals, and the AI's got the ability to create sub-goals, which it will have, you're not necessarily sure which sub-goals it will create. If it's smart, you can rely on it not creating sort of sub-goals that are clearly not what you wanted. So, for example, if you give it the goal of stopping climate change, the obvious way to do that is to get rid of people. But it'll be smart enough to realize that's not what you meant. But there's other cases where even you may not be quite sure what you expect to happen. And also there's cases where different people have very different goals. So people talk about the alignment problem as if we all agree on what's good to do and what's not good to do.
Right, and we don't at all.
So there's, for example, some people think it's good to drop 2,000-pound bombs on children and other people don't. They've both got their reasons. Can't align with both of them.
Other examples that today seem science fiction but could potentially happen include an autonomous vehicle trained in California that fails catastrophically in its first snowstorm because it has never seen the snow. Another risky situation is an AI system in a hospital setting that is told to cure patients with cancer, and the AI system decides that the easiest solution is to eliminate all the patients with cancer. According to the equation, no patients equals no cancer. Hinton is concerned that as AI systems become more capable, these kind of misalignments can become more dangerous, and that once a system becomes super intelligent, it might be impossible to correct alignment issues. For example, the system might prevent humans from shutting it down if that interferes with the system's goals. Hinton's comments and the interviewer's questions highlight a world made up of diverse people, cultures, and values. It might seem like an easy solution to gather the brightest minds and establish a universal set of global values to reduce the risks of AI. But Hinton is not convinced.
I think actually the biggest problem is we don't align with each other.
Right.
So you're going to introduce these very intelligent things, and they're going to have a big problem knowing what to do. If you put a whole bunch of people together, they can get very stupid.
Hinton did not elaborate on his final comments. However, to support his views, there is evidence suggesting that bringing together the brightest minds is not always the best solution. Consider these two catastrophic failures, the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger and the 1998 collapse of the long-term capital management hedge fund. In both cases, teams of brilliant individuals, including Nobel Prize winners at LTCM, made decisions that led to devastating consequences. On the other hand, if a superintelligence duplicates itself, there might be a much better communication and better decision.
But actually what you're going to see is maybe a few of these superintelligences, each with many copies of itself. And at least all the different copies of the same superintelligence will be able to communicate very well.
One of the major challenges for AI researchers is understanding how decisions are made inside the nodes of a neural network. Here is how Hinton explains this challenge.
I think we do know quite a lot of what's happening in transformers, but we certainly can't say when it makes a decision why it made the decision. We can't say that succinctly. And there's an analogy here.
Right.
If you take a physicist and ask him if he understands what happens when a leaf falls off a tree, so the leaf kind of goes like this, and it'll land on the ground somewhere, which depends on the wind and the precise angle it first fell off at and stuff.
Yeah.
So the physicist can't predict where the leaf's going to hit the ground, and it can't predict the exact trajectory of the leaf. But nevertheless, he feels he sort of understands what's going on. And I think that's where we are with AI.
Academic institutions and companies like Google DeepMind, OpenAI, and Anthropic are working on this issue. Anthropic, for example, believes that they have found a solution through a discipline called mechanistic interpretability. You can find more information at the link above. Even if a solution is found, it will likely not alleviate Hinton's concerns about the challenges posed by superintelligent systems. When asked why he holds such an alarmistic view, he explains that it all comes down to intelligent systems taking over our decision process. Let's listen.
Like if you want to get to Europe, your sub-goal is to get to the airport.
Right.
And you can focus on achieving that sub-goal.
Right.
AI agents will be the same. Now, as soon as you give something the ability to create a sub-goal to get stuff done, it'll realize there's a very good sub-goal that works for almost everything, which is get more control. So if I can get more control, I can get stuff done better. So even if I'm totally benevolent and I just want to achieve what you asked me to achieve, I'll realize that if I get more control, it'll be easier to do that. And actually, if these things are much smarter than us, they'll realize just take the control away from the people and we'll be able to achieve what they want much more efficiently. And that seems to me like a very slippery path, Because if you ever get an agent that gets any kind of self-interest, then it'll say, well, you know, if I had a few more data centers of that other superintelligence, I'd be able to get a bit smarter. So I'd be able to protect my interests a bit better. And then you'll get evolution. And once you get evolution, you'll get all this nasty competitive stuff.
Through his warnings, Geoffrey Hinton does not seek to alarm the public, but to provide guidelines for the policymakers and AI developers to mitigate these risks. He also envisions more optimistic scenarios. Here they are.
The good outcome would be that a superintelligence just starts running everything and looks after us, and we're kind of pets of a superintelligence.
Right.
That's Elon Musk's view of it.
Right.
And that's the good outcome. In order to make AI agents, you have to give them the ability to create sub-goals.
Yeah.
We've just talked about the downsides.
Right.
All the bad things that might happen.
Right.
There's an equal number of wonderful things that are going to happen.
Right.
Like, for example, in medicine, instead of going to your family doctor, you're going to be able to go to a doctor who's seen 100 million patients and knows your whole genome and the results of all your tests and the results of all your relative tests and has seen thousands of cases of this extremely rare disease you have and can just diagnose you right. And in North America, there's more than 200,000 people a year die of poor diagnoses.
Right.
Already, a doctor on difficult diagnoses, doctors get 40% correct, AI gets 50% correct,
Right.
and AI with a doctor gets 60% correct. So that's already like 50,000 people saved right there every year. So there's going to be wonderful things, particularly in healthcare, but actually anywhere where you want to make a prediction. So there's going to be huge increases in productivity. The problem is, in our political system, to turn those huge increases in productivity into benefits for everybody.
And this is the best message to end this video with.